My mother's laugh sounded like crushed glass under a high heel. She flicked the check into the caviar, her voice echoing through the dining room. "Don't embarrass yourself with that prop." She sighed. Grandpa forgot his meds again. That account closed in 1998. The table erupted in laughter. But as I retrieved the stained paper, Grandpa Silas squeezed my hand under the table. Hard, cold. It wasn't a tremor. It was a signal. The next day, I didn't just deposit $20,000. I triggered a time bomb. My name is Callista Thorne, and for the last 4 years, I have been invisible. I do not mean that in a metaphorical, poetic sense where I feel unheard. I mean it quite literally, in the grand, operatic production that was the Thorne family legacy. I was no longer a cast member. I was part of the stage crew. I was the one who reset the props, fixed the lighting, and ensured the stars looked good while I faded into the black curtains of the background. Tonight, however, was the annual early Christmas dinner at Thorne Manor in Newport, and attendance was mandatory. The manor sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, a hulking beast of stone and ivy that was designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Inside, the air always smelled of expensive pine and beeswax, a scent that I had long associated with judgment. I stood in the foyer, brushing the snow off my wool coat. It was a coat I had bought secondhand 3 years ago, and the lining was starting to fray. I tucked the loose thread away quickly before my mother could spot it. My mother, Evelyn, was already in the dining room directing the staff. To the outside world, Evelyn Thorne was a philanthropist, a socialite, and the matriarch of an old Rhode Island dynasty. To me, she was a director who would fire you if you missed your mark by an inch. I walked into the dining room. The table was set for 5. Crystal glasses sparkled under the massive chandelier, and the silver was polished to a mirror shine. It looked perfect. It looked like old money. But I am a preservationist by trade. My job at the Obsidian Institute involves analyzing artifacts, looking for the microscopic signs of wear, tear, and forgery. I see what others miss. I saw the scratches on the parquet floor that had been hastily covered with a Persian rug that was slightly too small for the room. I saw that the vintage Bordeaux being decanted into the crystal carafe was actually a $20 bottle from a local liquor store. I had seen the empty crate in the recycling bin outside, and I saw my father, Richard, standing by the fireplace, wearing a velvet smoking jacket that looked a little too loose on him, as if the stress of maintaining this charade was physically eating him away. "You are late," my father said without turning around. He swirled his drink. "Preston has been here for 30 minutes. The roads were icy." "Father," I said, my voice neutral. "Preston has a 4-wheel drive," he countered. "Success buys traction. Callista, remember that." I did not reply. I took my seat at the far end of the table. A moment later, Preston walked in. My brother was 29 years old, a man who had been launching a startup for the last 7 years. He was handsome in a glossy manufactured way, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. On his wrist sat a gold Rolex Submariner. I stared at the watch. I knew exactly how much was in my trust fund before my parents took over management of it. That watch was my tuition for a master's degree. "Hey, Callie," Preston grinned, sliding into the seat opposite me. "Still playing in the dirt with your old pots and pans." "I am an artifact conservator." "Preston," I said, unfolding my napkin. "Same thing?" He waved a hand dismissively. "You know, my incubator just got interest from a massive venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. We are talking 7 figures. I might need you to look over the term sheet. Oh wait, you don't speak business. Never mind." "Enough," my mother said. Gliding into the room, she wore a floor-length emerald gown that she had worn to the gala 3 years ago. She sat at the foot of the table. "Tonight is about family, and about Grandpa Silas." The nurse wheeled Grandpa Silas in. He was placed at the head of the table, at 85. Silas Thorne was a shell of the titan who had built the family fortune. His head lolled slightly to the side, and his eyes were milky and unfocused. He wore a bib over his suit to catch the drool. "He is having a good day," my mother announced loudly, as if speaking about a toddler. "He recognized the cat this morning." We did not have a cat. The dinner was a performance. My parents talked about summer plans in the Hamptons and investments that I knew did not exist. I ate my soup in silence, feeling the familiar cold sensation of isolation. I was the only person in this room who knew the price of milk. I was the only one here who paid rent. They lived in a fantasy funded by the last fumes of a dying engine. And I was the buzzkill who reminded them of reality just by existing. When the main course was cleared, the atmosphere shifted. It was time for the tradition every year. Grandpa Silas would give us our Christmas envelopes. In the past, these envelopes contained significant checks, dividends from the family trust. For the last 5 years, since his decline, my parents had managed everything, so the envelopes were usually just empty cards or scribbles. The nurse guided Silas's trembling hand to his pocket. He pulled out 3 white envelopes. The room went silent. Silas slid the first one toward Preston. My brother snatched it up, eager and greedy despite his claims of 7-figure deals. He tore it open. He pulled out a check. $50,000. Preston read the number. He blinked, then looked at my father. Then he let out a bark of laughter. "Good one. Grandpa. Really? $50,000. "What is it?" my mother asked, sipping her wine. "It is drawn on the sovereign bank account," Preston said, shaking his head. "The one that closed before I hit puberty." He crumpled the check into a ball. "You almost had me for a second there, old man. I thought maybe you had a secret stash." He tossed the paper ball toward the fireplace. It missed and rolled onto the hearth. "Just paper trash, like always." Silas did not react. His face remained blank, a mask of senility. He slid the second envelope to me. I picked it up. My name was written on the front in shaky, spiderweb handwriting, Callista. I opened it carefully, using my thumbnail to slit the seal without tearing the paper. Professional habit. Inside was a check. Blue security paper. The watermark looked authentic. Pay to the order of Callista Thorne. $20,000. I stared at the numbers. $20,000. To my family. This was the cost of a weekend trip or a handbag. To me, this was oxygen. This was the down payment on a studio apartment, so I would not have to live with 2 roommates in a basement that smelled of mildew. This was a new microscope for my freelance work. I held the check with both hands. It felt heavy. "Let me see that," my mother said. She did not ask. She reached across the centerpiece and snatched the check from my fingers. She held it up to the chandelier light, squinting. Then, the sound came. That laugh. It started low in her throat and escalated into a high, brittle sound that made my teeth ache. "Oh, Callista," she sighed, shaking her head. She flicked her wrist, and the check went flying. It drifted through the air like a dead leaf and landed squarely in the center of the silver platter holding the remains of the smoked salmon and caviar. "Don't embarrass yourself with that prop," she said. Her voice carried to the high ceilings, bouncing off the gold leaf molding. "Mom said Grandpa's $20,000 check was fake. Look at you. You actually thought it was real. You had that little look in your eye. That desperate, hungry look." "It has a routing number," I said quietly. "It is a prop. Hannah," she corrected herself, using her sister's name by mistake before correcting it, a common slight. "I mean, Callista, Grandpa forgot his meds again. That account closed in 1998. Can you imagine? You walk into a bank with that, and they will laugh you out of the building. Do you want to humiliate us? Do you want people to think the Thorns are writing bad checks?" "I just thought," I started, but Preston cut me off. "You thought you finally got a handout," Preston sneered. He reached for the wine decanter. "Don't be pathetic. Callie, you want $20,000? Ask me when my funding comes through next month. I will write you a check for $40,000 just for being a good little sister." He poured the red wine into his glass, but he was looking at me, his eyes full of malice. He tipped the decanter too far. A stream of dark red liquid splashed onto the platter, soaking the blue paper of the check. Oops, Preston said, zero remorse in his voice. Well, now it really is trash. Just like your car, my mother giggled. My father chuckled. A low rumble in his chest. Preston, be nice to your sister. She tries. I sat frozen. The humiliation burned under my skin, hot and prickly. It was not just the money. It was cruel. It was the way they enjoyed my disappointment. They fed on it. I looked at Grandpa Silas. He was staring at the centerpiece. He looked small, frail, a piece of furniture in a room full of wolves. I need to use the restroom, I said. Standing up, I walked to the platter. I did not care about their laughter anymore. I reached into the oily, wine-stained mess and picked up the check. Oh my God, Preston groaned. She is actually keeping it. That is sad. That is sad. Let her have her souvenir. My mother waved. Maybe she can frame it. I grabbed a linen napkin and dabbed the wine off the paper. It was stained purple and smelled of cheap grapes and fish oil, but the numbers were still legible. I folded it carefully and put it in my blazer pocket. Then, I did something I rarely did. I walked over to Grandpa Silas. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered. I knelt beside his wheelchair to adjust his blanket, a gesture of goodbye. My parents were busy laughing at something Preston had said about his imaginary investors. They were not looking. As my hand brushed against Silas's hand resting on his lap, I felt it. His fingers, which had been curled and lifeless all evening, suddenly snapped open. He grabbed my hand. His grip was not the weak, trembling hold of an 85-year-old man with dementia. It was iron. It was the grip of a man who had built skyscrapers. He squeezed my hand, once, twice, hard. I froze. I looked up at his face. His head was still lolled to the side, but for one split second, his left eye opened wider. It was clear, blue, sharp as a diamond cutter. He winked. Then, I felt metal against my palm. He pressed something small and cold into my hand and then released his grip, his hand returning to its limp, palsied state instantly. I pulled my hand back and slid it into my pocket, my fingers tracing the object. It was a key, small, heavy. I recognized the texture, brass, but not modern brass, old, oxidized brass. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I am leaving, I announced. Already? My mother asked, bored. We haven't had dessert. The chef made that pear tart you used to like when you were 12. I have work in the morning, I lied. The museum opens early. Fine, run along. My father dismissed me without looking up. Drive safe in that death trap of yours. I walked out of the dining room, down the long marble hallway, and out the heavy oak front doors. The cold ocean air hit me like a slap, cleansing the scent of fake pine and stale wine from my lungs. I got into my 10-year-old sedan. The engine sputtered before turning over, a stark contrast to the purr of Preston's Range Rover parked next to me. As I drove down the winding driveway, leaving the golden glow of Thorne Manor behind in the rearview mirror, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the check and the key. I turned on the dome light. The check was stained, yes, but the signature at the bottom, Silas A. Thorne, was not shaky. It was firm. It was the signature on the old stock certificates I had seen in the archives. And the key. It was a small, black brass key with a complex head shape. I knew this key. I had seen it 1,000 times in my childhood, hanging around Grandpa's neck on a leather cord when he taught me how to tell the difference between fool's gold and real ore. He used to tell me it was the key to his memory box. My mother said the account closed in 1998. My brother said the check was a prop. They said Grandpa was gone. His mind turned to mush, but a man with a mushy mind does not have a grip that could crush a walnut. A man with a mushy mind does not wink with the precision of a sniper. I looked at the check again. $20,000. Why 20? Why not 50 like Preston? Or 520 was a specific number. It felt calculated. And the key? Why give it to me now? A cold shiver that had nothing to do with the winter air ran down my spine. I realized that the performance back in the dining room had an audience of one. And it wasn't me. It was Silas. He had been watching them. He had been testing them. And they had failed. I gripped the steering wheel. I was going to the bank tomorrow. Not to embarrass myself. Not to make a scene. I was going to the bank because for the first time in my life, I had a hypothesis that terrified me. My family wasn't just mean. They were liars. And if this check cleared, it meant everything they had told me for the last decade about money, about the trust fund, about Grandpa's health was a fabrication. I turned onto the highway, the dark road stretching out before me. I did not know it yet, but I was driving away from my past and straight into a war zone, and I was the only one who had just been handed a weapon. The morning sun hit the windshield of my sedan with a glare that felt less like a new beginning and more like an interrogation lamp. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun and put on the only tailored blazer I owned, a charcoal gray piece I usually reserved for job interviews or funerals. Today felt a bit like both. I parked 3 blocks away from the downtown branch of Sovereign Bank because I did not want the valet to see the rust on my wheel wells. Walking the rest of the way, I could feel the piece of paper in my purse burning a hole through the leather. It sat there, folded inside my wallet, smelling of stale Merlot and humiliation. At 9 o'clock sharp, I pushed through the heavy glass revolving doors. The bank smelled of sanitized carpet and money, a crisp, dry scent that was entirely alien to my current life. I walked straight to the teller line. There was only one person ahead of me, an elderly woman counting out pennies. I waited, my hands clasping my purse so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mother's voice was a loop in my head. "Don't embarrass yourself. It is a prop." When it was my turn, I stepped up to the counter. The teller was a woman named Brenda, according to her name tag. She had the tired, skeptical eyes of someone who had seen every scam in the book. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "I would like to deposit this check." I slid the blue paper across the marble counter. Brenda picked it up. She frowned immediately. Her eyes darted to the purple stain on the corner where Preston had spilled the wine. She rubbed the paper between her thumb and forefinger, feeling the texture. "It is a bit messy," she said, her voice flat. "Was this in the wash?" "A dinner accident," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But the routing numbers are clear." Brenda did not look convinced. She peered at the amount, $20,000. Then she looked at me, my fraying coat cuffs, my nervous posture, and back at the check. The math did not add up in her head. People who looked like me did not walk in with $20,000 checks from personal accounts. "I need to verify this," Brenda said. She did not smile. She typed something into her keyboard, frowned, and typed again. Then she picked up her phone. My stomach dropped. This was it. The humiliation my mother had promised. Brenda was calling security. She was going to tell me the account was closed, that I was a fraud, that I was trying to cash a piece of senile dementia-induced fiction. I could already feel the heat rising in my cheeks, preparing for the shame of being escorted out. "Mr. Henderson," Brenda said into the phone, her voice lowered but audible in the quiet lobby. "Yes, counter 4. It is a large personal check from the Silas Thorne account. Yes, the old one. You had better come out here." She hung up and looked at me. "The branch manager is coming." I wanted to run. I wanted to snatch the check back, tear it up, and disappear into my invisible life. But my feet felt leaden. A moment later, a heavy door to the side opened. Mr. Henderson, a man with a polished, bald head and a suit that cost more than my annual rent, walked out. He did not look angry. He looked urgent. He walked straight to Brenda, looked at the screen she pointed to, and then looked at the check. He didn't sneer. He didn't laugh. He went pale. He looked up at me, and his expression transformed. The skepticism vanished, replaced by a terrifying level of deference. "Ms. Thorne," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "My apologies for the delay. Please, come with me. We don't handle transactions of this nature at the counter." He gestured toward the glass-walled offices at the back, the VIP section. I followed him, feeling Brenda's confused stare burning into my back. We sat down in an office with plush leather chairs and a view of the city snow. Mr. Henderson closed the door and blinds. I was not aware Mr. Silas was reactivating this ledger. Mr. Henderson said, typing rapidly on his own terminal. We received the authorization codes at midnight, but I assumed it was a system glitch until you walked in. Is the check valid? I asked. My voice sounded small in the quiet room. Mr. Henderson stopped typing and looked at me over his glasses. Valid, Miss Thorne. This check is drawn from a private trust established in 1998. It is called the Project Nemesis Subtrust. It has been dormant, accumulating interest, for 28 years. The funds are available immediately. Project Nemesis. A chill went down my spine. Nemesis, the Greek goddess of retribution, the punisher of hubris. Grandpa Silas hadn't just named a bank account. He had named a weapon. Do you want to deposit the full amount? Mr. Henderson asked. Yes, I said. Into my checking account. He clicked the mouse, the printer whirred. He slid a receipt across the desk. I looked at the number. Previous balance $120.45. Deposit $20,000. Current balance $20,120.45. I stared at the slip of paper. It wasn't millions. It wasn't the kind of money that bought islands. But to me, sitting there in a blazer I had bought at a thrift store, it was freedom. It was a shield. Is there anything else, Ms. Thorne? No, I said, standing up. Thank you. I walked out of the bank in a daze. My mother was wrong. Preston was wrong. They were so arrogant, so sure of their own narrative, that they had dismissed reality because it did not fit their script. I drove home, my mind racing. Why 20,000? Why now Grandpa Silas was a man of precision. He didn't do random acts of kindness. This was a specific tool for a specific job. I lived in a studio apartment in a converted warehouse district. The heating was spotty, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's television. I locked the door behind me, threw my bag on the futon, and went straight to the closet. I pulled out a cardboard box labeled Childhood. Inside, buried under old yearbooks and a dried corsage from prom, was a wooden box. It was made of dark walnut, heavy and polished. Grandpa Silas had given it to me when I was 10. For your treasures, he had said. At the time, I had used it to store pretty rocks and sea glass. When I left for college, I had emptied it. But I had kept the box because I loved the smell of the wood. It had a lock, a small, intricate keyhole. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black brass key Silas had slipped me last night. My hand trembled slightly. The key slid into the lock with a satisfying, heavy click. I turned it. The lid popped open. The box was not empty. Inside, there was no money. Instead, there was a stack of documents, folded tightly to fit, and a silver USB drive taped to the inside of the lid. I took the documents out and spread them on my small kitchen table. The light from the window was gray and weak, so I turned on my desk lamp. I switched modes. I was no longer the granddaughter. I was the analyst. I looked at these papers the way I looked at an ancient manuscript, hunting for the story in the ink. The first document was a foreclosure notice. Notice of default. Property Thorne Manor, 12 Cliffside Drive, Newport. Outstanding balance, $4,200,000. I blinked. My parents owned the manor outright, or at least, they claimed they did. They had told everyone the mortgage was paid off in the 90s. This document was dated 2 weeks ago. They were months behind on payments. I picked up the next paper. It was a credit report for my brother. Preston. It was a disaster. Maxed out cards. Defaulted loans for business ventures that were little more than pyramid schemes. Then came the bank statements for the main family trust. The one my mother claimed was managed conservatively. The balance column was a hemorrhage of red ink, withdrawals for lifestyle maintenance, consulting fees paid to shell companies, and massive transfers to cover gambling debts. They were broke. My heart hammered against my ribs. The grandeur, the caviar, the sneering at my poverty, it was all a facade. They were drowning, and they were using every last cent to paint the hull of the Titanic gold while it sank. But it was the last document that made the air leave my lungs. It was an invoice, a private sale agreement. Item, the celestial set. Complete parure including necklace, earrings, and brooch, platinum setting, Burmese rubies, and the eye of midnight diamond. Seller Richard and Evelyn Thorne. Buyer private collection. Singapore. Date October 14th. 2 years ago. Price $8 million. I stopped breathing. The celestial set was not theirs to sell. It was my grandmother's legacy, left specifically to me in an irrevocable trust, to be released on my 25th birthday, when I turned 25 last year. My father had sat me down. He had looked grave and concerned. He told me the insurance premiums were too high to transfer the jewelry to me yet. He said it was safer in the family vault. He said he was protecting me. They had sold it. They had sold my inheritance 2 years ago. I looked at the date again. October 14th. That was the same week Preston had bought his Range Rover. That was the same month my mother had redecorated the sunroom. They had eaten my inheritance. They had driven it, worn it, and drank it. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. It was the same feeling I got when I identified a forgery in the lab. The initial disappointment was always replaced by the thrill of the diagnosis. I looked at the USB drive. I didn't need to plug it in to know what was on it. Grandpa Silas had been gathering evidence. He had been watching them from his wheelchair, playing the part of the senile old man while he documented every theft, every lie, every betrayal. He couldn't act. If he revealed he was sane, they would have him declared incompetent immediately. They had the doctors on their payroll. I had seen the payments in the ledger. They would drug him into oblivion to keep control of the remaining assets. That was why he needed me. That was why he gave me $20,000. It wasn't a gift. It was a retainer. He was hiring me. I picked up the invoice for the celestial set. My hand was steady now. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room. "I accept the job." I looked at the date on the calendar. The audit. My mother had mentioned an audit for the insurance renewal coming up next week. If they had sold the necklace, they couldn't produce it for an audit, unless they faked it. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my mother, Evelyn Thorne. "I hope you threw that paper away. We are having a strategic planning dinner tonight. Preston needs a logo for his new venture. Be there at 7. Don't be late. And dress better." I looked at the message. A strategic planning dinner. They wanted free labor. They wanted the help to come and polish their ego. I typed a reply. "Callista, I will be there." I put the phone down. I would go. I would design their logo. I would nod and smile and play the part of the invisible, grateful daughter. I would let them think I was still the prop they could move around their stage. But I wasn't a prop anymore. I was the critic. And I had just found the flaw that would bring the whole theater crashing down. I packed the documents back into the box and locked it. I shoved the box deep under my bed, behind a stack of winter boots. Then I sat back at the table and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account and stared at the balance one more time. $20,120. It was enough to buy equipment. It was enough to buy the chemicals I needed. It was enough to verify the greatest forgery I would ever expose. I closed the laptop. My hands were cold, but my mind was on fire. The war hadn't just started. I had just received the battle plans, and tonight I was going into enemy territory with a smile on my face. The Obsidian Institute was a fortress of silence and climate-controlled air. It was located in a brutalist concrete building on the edge of the city, a place where time did not pass. It was preserved. This was my sanctuary. Here, the chaotic entropy of the world was halted by glass cases and argon gas. I swiped my keycard at the heavy steel door, the beep echoing in the empty corridor, and walked straight to my lab. I did not turn on the overhead fluorescence. I preferred the blue glow of the monitors and the hum of the ventilation system. I sat down at my workstation, the ergonomic chair adjusting to my posture, and placed the USB drive Grandpa Silas had given me on the desk, but I did not plug it in yet. First, I needed to verify the hypothesis that had kept me awake all night. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I logged into the art loss register and the proprietary dark web tracking database that the Institute paid $50,000 a year to access. We used it to track stolen antiquities for museums. But today, I was tracking my own birthright. I typed in the search parameters: the Celestial Set, Provenance Thorne Family Estate, commissioned 1892, Maker Cartier. The screen buffered for a second. A spinning wheel of white pixels against a black background. According to my grandmother's will, the set was valued at $15 million. It was a masterpiece of platinum, Burmese rubies, and the centerpiece, a 40-carat diamond known as the Eye of Midnight. My parents had told me repeatedly that the market for antique jewelry had crashed. They told me transferring the title to me would incur massive taxes we could not afford. They told me to be patient. The search results are populated. My breath hitched in my throat. There was a hit, not for the whole set, but for a piece of it. Item: Celestial Starburst Brooch, ruby and diamond. Status: sold. Venue: The Orchid Room, Singapore. Private auction. Date: November 14th, 2 years ago. Hammer price: $320,000. I stared at the image on the screen. It was unmistakably my grandmother's brooch. I knew every facet of those rubies. I had stared at them in the family portrait in the hallway since I was a child. They had broken the set. In the world of high-end preservation, breaking a parure, a matching set of jewelry, is considered a cardinal sin. It destroys the historical integrity of the piece. It cuts the value in half. It is something only desperate junkies or ignorant thieves do to make a quick sale. My parents were both. I felt a wave of nausea. I remembered that November 2 years ago vividly. I had been accepted into a prestigious doctoral program in London. It was my dream. The tuition was $40,000. I had gone to my father in his study. Clutching the acceptance letter, I remembered the way he had looked at me over his reading glasses, his face a mask of pained regret. "Callista, honey," he had said, "we are having a liquidity crisis. The markets are bleeding us dry. All the assets are tied up in fixed holdings. If we had the cash, you know we would give it to you, but we just have to tighten our belts." I had believed him. I had declined the offer. I had spent that winter eating instant oatmeal and walking to work because I could not afford snow tires. 3 days after he told me we were broke, my brother Preston had driven up the driveway in a McLaren. It was bright orange. It looked like a radioactive tangerine. When I asked how we could afford it, my mother told me it was a lease, a business expense for Preston's image. "He needs to look successful to attract investors," she had said. "You would not understand. Callista, you do not have a business mind." They had sold my grandmother's brooch to buy that car. They had literally pinned my inheritance to the asphalt and burned it for a joyride. I minimized the database window and opened a terminal. It was time to look inside the house. My family thought of me as the help. I was the one who set up their Wi-Fi, their cloud storage, their synchronized calendars. I was the one who told them to use two-factor authentication, which they refused because it was too annoying. I knew their passwords because they were lazy. My father used his birthday. My mother used the name of her favorite spaniel who died in 1995. I logged into the Thorne family cloud. It was like walking into a burning building. The inbox was a deluge of red flags, unpaid property tax notices, threatening letters from a hedge fund in the Cayman Islands, a final warning from the country club regarding unpaid dues. They were not just broke. They were insolvent. They were living on a credit line that had snapped months ago. I scrolled through the emails, my eyes scanning for names I recognized. I found a thread between my father and Preston titled, "Liquid Strategy." I opened it. The email was dated 3 days ago. From Richard Thorne to Preston Thorne. Subject: Crypto dip. Preston, stop telling me it will bounce back. The leverage call is due on Friday. We are underwater. The Singapore contact says he can't move the earrings yet because the market is flooded. But he has a buyer for the big one. We have to sell the Eye of Midnight. It is the only thing left with enough density to cover the margin. I read the next line, and my blood turned to ice. We need to move fast. That little rat Callista is starting to ask questions about the trust. If she finds out the inventory is light, she might lawyer up, but she is slow. She is just a polisher of old things. She thinks small. Get the diamond out of the safe and ready for transport. We tell her it is being cleaned for the Christmas gala. She is just a polisher of old things. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the lab. That was what they thought of me, a janitor, a dull, unimaginative drone who existed to keep their surfaces shiny while they did the real work of spending money. They did not just steal from me because they were greedy. They stole from me because they did not respect me. They thought my intelligence was a party trick, something useful for fixing the internet but useless in the real world. They were wrong. My job wasn't just cleaning. My job was forensic analysis. My job was understanding the chemical composition of a lie. I looked at the date of the email again. They still had the Eye of Midnight, or at least, they hadn't shipped it yet. They were planning to sell the centerpiece of the collection, the heart of the legacy, to cover a gambling debt on cryptocurrency. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the hard surface. I picked it up, a text message from Evelyn Thorne. Mom, I assume you disposed of that ridiculous check Grandpa gave you. Please tell me you didn't actually try to cash it. Anyway, come to dinner tonight. Preston is launching a new venture. Thorne Capital, and he needs a logo. Something modern but classy. Don't charge us. It is good exposure for your portfolio. Be here by 7. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. She had just insulted me, gaslit me about the check, and demanded free labor in the span of 3 sentences. I did not feel the familiar pang of hurt this time. I did not feel the urge to cry or the desire to please them. I felt a cold, hard resolve crystallizing in my chest. It was the same feeling I got when I looked through a microscope and saw the hairline fracture in a vase that everyone else thought was perfect. Once you see the flaw, you cannot unsee it, and you know that with just the right amount of pressure, the whole thing will shatter. They wanted a logo fine. I would give them a design. I would design their downfall. I typed a reply. My fingers steady. Callista. The check is taken care of. I will be there at 7. I have some ideas for the logo. I put the phone down and turned back to my computer. I opened a new window and pulled up the schematics for the Eye of Midnight. I studied the refractory index, the specific inclusions, and the geometry of the cut. If they wanted to sell the diamond, they would need an appraisal. And if they needed an appraisal, they would need a certificate. And right now, in this state, there were only 3 people qualified to sign off on a stone of that magnitude. One was in the hospital, one was on vacation in the Alps, and the third one was sitting in this chair. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was a smile of anticipation. They were trying to smuggle a diamond past a gemologist. It was like trying to sneak sunrise past a rooster. I reached for the phone on my desk and dialed the internal extension for the materials fabrication lab downstairs. "Hey, Jerry?" I said when the technician answered. "It's Callista. Do we still have that high-grade cubic zirconia blank we used for the refraction calibration test? The big one." "Yeah, it is in the scrap drawer," Jerry said. "Why?" "I need to borrow it," I said, my eyes fixed on the email from my father. "I have a family project I need to work on." "Sure," Jerry said. "Just don't cut yourself. That stuff is hard." "I know," I said. "That is exactly what I'm counting on." I hung up. The plan formed in my mind, complete and perfect. They wanted to sell the Eye of Midnight. I would let them. But first, I was going to make sure that when they reached into that velvet box, all they pulled out was their own reflection, fake, hollow, and worth absolutely nothing. I stood up and grabbed my coat. I had a dinner to attend, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading it. I was looking forward to the show. I steered my rusting sedan away from the main driveway of Thorne Manor. killing the headlights as I turned onto the service road that wound through the dense pine forest. My parents were busy in the main house, likely arguing over which vintage of champagne to serve at the imaginary victory party for Preston's non-existent company. They would not notice I was gone. They never noticed. To them, I was just a background process, a low-humming appliance that occasionally needed a reboot. I was heading toward the gatehouse. It was a small, stone structure built in the 1920s, originally intended for the estate manager for the last 5 years. It had been the prison of Silas Thorne. My mother called it the sanctuary. She said it was better for Grandpa to be away from the noise and bustle of the main house, where he could rest in peace. I know the truth now. It was not a sanctuary. It was a quarantine zone. They kept him there to control who he saw and, more importantly, what he said. I parked the car behind a cluster of rhododendrons and walked the rest of the way on foot. The air was biting cold, sharp with the scent of upcoming snow. I saw the night nurse, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who spent most of her shifts watching reality television on her tablet, sitting on the front porch, wrapped in a thick blanket, smoking a cigarette. The blue light of her screen illuminated her bored face. I circled around to the back. I knew a way in. When I was 12, I discovered that the window latch in the library was loose. Grandpa had never fixed it. He used to leave it open for me so I could sneak in and read his encyclopedias when my parents were hosting their insufferable cocktail parties. I pushed the sash up. It slid silently on well-oiled tracks. I climbed over the sill and dropped onto the Persian rug inside. The room smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and dust. It was the smell of my childhood. I stood up, brushing the snow off my knees, and turned toward the wingback chair by the fireplace. Silas Thorne was sitting there. He was not slumped over. He was not drooling. He was sitting with his spine straight, his legs crossed, reading a hardcover book by the light of a floor lamp. He looked up as I entered. His blue eyes, which usually drifted aimlessly when my parents were around, locked onto mine with the precision of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "You are late," he said. His voice was gravel and iron, devoid of the tremor he affected in public. "And you came in through the window. Good. I was worried you might try the front door and get stopped by that dragon outside." "The check cleared," I said, walking into the light. "Of course it cleared," Silas scoffed. Closing his book, I glanced at the title, The Art of War. "I may be old, Callista, but I am not insolvent. Did you deposit the whole thing?" "Every cent," I replied. $20,000. "Good," he nodded. "That is your war chest. You are going to need it." He gestured to the ottoman opposite him. "Sit down. We do not have much time before Mrs. Gable comes in to give me my sedative, which is actually just a vitamin pill because the doctor knows I don't swallow the real ones." I sat down. Seeing him like this, lucid and commanding, was disorienting. For 5 years, I had mourned the loss of his mind. I had grieved for the grandfather who taught me how to identify minerals and read a balance sheet, and all this time, he had been right here, trapped inside his own performance. "Why?" I asked. The question came out softer than I intended. "Why did you pretend?" "For 5 years. Grandpa, 5 years. You let them treat you like furniture. You let them mock you." Silas sighed. The sound was heavy, carrying the weight of a century. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Because I needed to know, Callista," he said softly. "When you build a fortune like ours, you attract parasites. Some of them are strangers, but the most dangerous ones share your last name. I knew Richard and Evelyn were spendthrifts. I knew Preston was useless, but I needed to see how deep the rot went. I needed to see what they would do when they thought no one was watching." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "And I needed to see who you were. You were quiet. You went away to school. You never asked for money. You drove that terrible car and worked in that museum. I had to know if you were weak, or if you were just waiting." "I wasn't waiting," I said honestly. "I was hiding." "Hiding is a strategy," Silas said. But the time for hiding is over. We have reached the end game." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you know why I gave you the key last night? Do you know why we have to act now?" "Because they are broke," I said. "I saw the foreclosure notice on the main house." Silas raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You opened the box. Good girl. Yes, they are broke. But it is worse than that. They are desperate. Next month, on the 15th, they have a hearing scheduled with Judge Holloway. They are filing for full conservatorship over my estate. They claim my dementia has progressed to a critical stage. If they win, they get power of attorney, they get control of the Black Fund, they get everything." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Can they win?" "If I stay silent," Silas said. "They have paid off 2 doctors to testify that my brain is mush. Once they have the signature, they will put me in a state facility and sedate me until I die. And they will strip mine whatever is left of the legacy. So we fight them," I said. "We go to the judge. We show him you are sane." "No." Silas shook his head sharply. "That is not enough. If I just walk into court and say, 'I am fine,' it becomes a he said, she said battle. They will drag it out. They will say I am having a moment of clarity. They will freeze the assets during litigation. We need something definitive. We need a kill shot." He smiled then, a dry, thin smile that did not reach his eyes. "We are going to give them exactly what they want. I am going to call a family meeting tomorrow. I am going to tell them that in a moment of lucidity, I have decided to transfer the estate to them early, to avoid taxes." I stared at him. "You are going to give it to them." "I am going to dangle it in front of them," Silas corrected. "I will tell them that I am ready to sign over the deed to the manor and the remaining investment accounts. But I will have one condition, a formality. My lawyer will require a full inventory of the family assets to establish the basis for the transfer. Specifically, the most valuable portable asset we own." "The celestial set," I whispered. "Exactly." Silas leaned back, looking satisfied. "I will insist that the jewelry be produced, inspected, and valued before any papers are signed. I will say it is for their protection, to establish the tax baseline." "Grandpa," I said, my voice rising in panic, "you don't understand. They can't produce it. They sold it. I found the invoice. They sold the necklace to a private buyer in Singapore 2 years ago. They broke the set." Silas didn't blink. He didn't look shocked. He looked triumphant. "I know," he said calmly. I paused, processing his words. "You know, I am the one who tipped off the insurance adjuster to watch the auction houses," Silas said. "I tracked that sale. I know exactly what they did. That is why this is the perfect trap. When I demand the inventory, they will have 2 choices. Admit they stole it and face prison immediately. Or try to fake it." I finished the thought. "Precisely." Silas nodded. "They are arrogant. They think I am blind and senile. They think you are stupid. They will think they can swap in some glass and paste, wave it in front of my cloudy old eyes, and get me to sign the papers. They will walk right into the fraud." He pointed a bony finger at me. "And that is where you come in, Callista. They think you are just a prop. They think you are the quiet little mouse who polishes old spoons. They do not know that you are the best forensic analyst in the state." "They want me to design a logo for them tonight," I said, the irony tasting bitter on my tongue. "They don't even know what I actually do for a living." "Use that," Silas commanded. "Let them underestimate you. Let them think you are irrelevant. When the inspection happens, I will insist that you be there. I will say I want my granddaughter to have one last look at her grandmother's jewels. They will agree because they think you are harmless. And then, when the moment is right, you are going to destroy them. You are going to use your science, your chemicals, your lights. You are going to expose the fake in front of the lawyer, in front of the witnesses. You are going to catch them in the act of committing a felony." I looked at the old man. He was asking me to destroy my own parents. He was asking me to send my brother to jail. Can you do it? Silas asked, his voice low. I know they are your flesh and blood, Callista, but they ate your future. They ate the legacy I built for you. Are you ready to take it back? I thought about the check in my pocket. I thought about the orange McLaren parked in the driveway while I ate instant noodles. I thought about the prop comment at dinner. I am not just a preservationist, Grandpa, I said, my voice steady. I am specialized in authentication. I don't just fix things. I found the truth. Is that a yes? That is a yes, I said. Good. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope. This one was smaller. This is the contact information for my private attorney, Mr. Holloway. He is the only honest lawyer left in Rhode Island. Call him. He knows the plan. He will set up the meeting. He handed me the envelope. Now go, before Mrs. Gable finishes her cigarette. You have work to do. I stood up and tucked the envelope into my blazer. I looked at Silas one last time. He was already settling back into his chair, arranging his face into the slack, vacant expression of the invalid. It was a terrifying transformation. Grandpa, I whispered. Go, he mumbled, a little bit of drool forming at the corner of his mouth, fully in character. The cat needs to be fed. I climbed back out the window, sliding the sash down behind me. The cold air felt different now. It didn't feel like winter. It felt like the calm before a storm. I walked back to my car, my boots crunching on the frozen ground. I had a plan, I had a partner, and I had the element of surprise. As I drove back toward the city, my mind began to race with the logistics. If they were going to fake the celestial set, they would need a fabricator. They would need materials. They would do it cheaply because they had no money. They would use cubic zirconia or high-lead glass. I needed to prepare my kit. I needed my refractometer. I needed my specific gravity fluids. I needed my shortwave ultraviolet light. I wasn't just going to a dinner party tonight. I was going on a reconnaissance mission. I would design their logo. I would listen to their lies. And I would smile, knowing that in less than 48 hours, I would be the one holding the gavel. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Preston. Preston, bring your laptop. I have a vision for the brand. Think global dominance. I laughed out loud in the empty car. It was a harsh, sharp sound. Global dominance, I said to the dashboard. Sure, Preston, let's start with a prison cell. I pressed the accelerator. The engine roared, and for the first time in years, the sound didn't make me worry about a breakdown. It sounded like a war cry. I was ready. I sat in the corner of the oversized mahogany library, tapping away at my laptop. To my family, I was doing exactly what I had been told to do. I was working on the logo for Preston's new venture, Thorn Capital. I had spent the last hour moving a generic serif font around a white background while my brother hovered over my shoulder, smelling of expensive scotch and unearned confidence, telling me to make it pop more. I need to take a call. My father, Richard, announced suddenly from the adjacent drawing room. His voice carried through the open double doors. It is your grandfather. Put him on speaker. My mother, Evelyn, commanded. I want to hear how lucid he is today. Preston, come in here, my father shouted. Preston rolled his eyes at me. Don't move. Callista, I want 3 variations of that design by the time I get back, and try to make it look less pedestrian. Of course, I said, keeping my head down. I will be right here. Preston grabbed his tumbler of whiskey and sauntered into the drawing room. I watched him go, counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. As soon as the heavy oak doors clicked shut, my demeanor changed. I was no longer the submissive daughter. I minimized Adobe Illustrator and opened the application running in the background. It was a live feed from the security cameras I had installed in the drawing room 3 years ago. At the time, my father had asked me to put them in to monitor the cleaning staff because he was convinced the maid was stealing his cigars. He had never learned how to access the system, so he had forgotten it existed, but I hadn't. I plugged my earbuds in. The audio was crystal clear. On my screen, I saw them. My father was pacing near the fireplace. My mother was perched on the edge of the velvet sofa like a vulture waiting for roadkill. Preston was leaning against the mantel, looking bored. "Hello, Dad," Richard said into his cell phone, which lay on the coffee table. "We are all here." "Richard!" Grandpa Silas's voice filled my headphones. It was a masterpiece of acting. He sounded weak, his voice trembling just enough to suggest frailty, but coherent enough to be legally binding. "I have been thinking about the end." "Oh, Dad, don't talk like that," my mother said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy while she checked her reflection in her compact mirror. "You have plenty of time." "No, Evelyn," Silas rasped. The doctors, they say things are accelerating, and I have been worrying about the estate taxes. The government, they will take 40% if we wait until probate. 40% of the hard work I built." I saw Richard stop pacing. The mention of money had frozen him in place. "That is a concern, Dad," Richard said, trying to keep the greed out of his voice. "We have always said we should protect the assets." "I want to do it now," Silas said. "I want to transfer the bulk of the estate to you and Patricia immediately. The liquid assets, the investment portfolio, everything. It is roughly $30 million. On the screen, my family looked like they had just been injected with pure adrenaline. My mother snapped her compact shut. Richard's eyes went wide. Preston actually pumped his fist in the air silently. $30 million. It was the lifeline they had been praying for. It was the solution to the foreclosure. The gambling debts, the impending bankruptcy. That is a very wise decision. Dad." Richard stammered. "We can come over right now. I can have the papers drawn up tonight." "Yes," Silas said, "but there is a catch." The air in the drawing room seemed to vanish. Preston froze mid-sip. "My lawyer, Mr. Halloway, is a stickler for the rules," Silas continued, his voice taking on a whiny, annoyed tone that was perfectly calculated. "He says we cannot just transfer the accounts without a full asset valuation to establish the tax basis. He insists on a physical inventory of the hard assets." "That is fine," Richard said quickly, relieved. "We have the house, the cars, and the jewelry," Silas interrupted. "Specifically, your mother's collection, the celestial set. Halloway says it is the single most valuable portable asset in the trust. He needs to verify its condition and current market value before he signs off on the transfer of the $30 million. It is just a formality. Of course, just a box to check." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. It happened instantly, turning her from a flushed socialite into a pale ghost. Richard gripped the back of the sofa so hard his knuckles turned white. Preston choked on his scotch. The celestial set," Richard squeaked. "Yes," Silas said. "Bring it to Halloway's office on Friday. Noon. Once he sees it and logs it, the transfer happens immediately. I am tired. Richard, I want this done. I will see you Friday." The line went dead. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. It was a tableau of absolute terror. Then, the explosion happened. "Oh my God," Evelyn whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God. Richard, we are dead." "Shut up," Richard hissed, turning on her. "Let me think." "Think," Evelyn shrieked, standing up. "There is nothing to think about. We sold it. We sold the damn necklace 2 years ago. We sold the brooch. We sold the earrings. It is gone." "Richard, it is sitting in a vault in Singapore. Keep your voice down." Richard pointed frantically at the door to the library where I was supposed to be working. "Callista is right there." "I don't care about Callista." Evelyn paced frantically, her heels clicking like gunfire on the hardwood. "I care about the fact that we just committed grand larceny and fraud against a trust fund. And now the lawyer wants to see the evidence if we don't produce that necklace on Friday. We won't just lose $30 million. We go to prison. Do you understand federal prison?" Preston slammed his glass down on the table. Can't we buy it back? Call the guy in Singapore? With what money, you idiot? Richard roared. He paid $8 million for it. We have $11,000 in the operating account, and even if we had the money, he won't sell it back in 48 hours. So we are screwed. Preston slumped onto the sofa. That is it. Game over. I was looking at yachts. Dad, I had a browser tab open for a 70-foot Sunseeker. Forget the yacht. Richard grabbed his hair, pulling at it. We are going to lose the house. Holloway will file criminal charges. Silas might be senile, but Holloway isn't. If we show up empty-handed, he will know. I watched them spiral. It was intoxicating. For years, I had watched them scheme and lie with perfect composure, seeing them sweat, seeing the raw, unfiltered panic. Felt like justice. They were rats in a maze, and they had just realized there was no cheese, only a trap. Wait, Preston said. He sat up straight, his eyes narrowing. Wait a minute. Grandpa hasn't seen the necklace in 10 years. He is half blind. He didn't even notice I was drinking his vintage scotch tonight. So, Evelyn snapped. So, Preston turned to his father. He doesn't need to see the real necklace. He just needs to see a necklace. Richard stopped pacing. He looked at his son. A fake? A replica. Preston corrected, the salesman in him taking over. I know a guy, in Chinatown. He supplies the props for the theater district and some of the less legal photo shoot requirements. He works with high-grade cubic zirconia and leaded crystals. If we give him the photos, he can mock up a setting in 24 hours. Are you insane? Evelyn asked. But her voice wasn't dismissive anymore. It was hopeful. A cubic zirconia set. In front of a lawyer. Holloway is a lawyer, not a jeweler, Preston argued. And Grandpa is a vegetable. We walk in, open the box, let it sparkle for 30 seconds, close the box, and sign the papers. Who is going to know? It just needs to look real from 3 feet away. Richard rubbed his chin. I could see the gears turning. The desperation was overriding the logic. It would have to be good. The mounting would have to be platinum-plated silver. Not tin. It needs weight. My guy can do it, Preston insisted. It will cost us, though, rush fee, maybe $5,000? We can put it on the emergency card, Richard said. If this works, we get $30 million. $5,000 is nothing. But what about the inspection? Evelyn chewed her lip, her eyes darting around the room. Silas said, verify condition. What if they bring in an expert? What if they ask Callista? My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. Callista. Preston laughed. Mom, please, Callista wouldn't know a diamond from a doorstop. She works at the Obsidian Institute, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. She is a conservator. She handles artifacts. She handles broken pots, Richard sneered. The disdain in his voice was so thick I could practically taste it through the headphones. She glues ceramic shards together and dusts off old manuscripts. She is a librarian with a chemistry set. Evelyn, she is not a gemologist. But she has eyes, Evelyn whispered. She is a rabbit. Richard waved his hand dismissively. She is shy. She is pathetic. And she is terrified of me. Even if she suspected something, she wouldn't dare open her mouth. Did you see her at dinner? She took that check insult like a beaten dog. She doesn't have the spine to accuse us of anything. Besides, Preston added, grinning, we can tell her the necklace was just cleaned. If it looks too shiny, we say it was polished. She won't know the difference. She drives a Corolla. Mom, she has never touched an $8 million necklace in her life. I sat in the library, staring at the screen. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. They didn't know. They didn't know that my broken pots were worth more than their lives. They didn't know that I had spent the last 4 years mastering the refractive indices of every gemstone known to man. They didn't know that I had written a paper on the specific inclusion patterns of Burmese rubies that was currently being used as a reference text at the GIA. They thought I was a rabbit. They were about to find out that a rabbit is just a wolf that hasn't shown its teeth yet. "Do it," Richard commanded. "Preston, call your guy. Send him the file photos from the insurance appraisal we did 5 years ago. Tell him I want it ready by Thursday night. We need 24 hours to distress it a little so it doesn't look brand new." "On it." Preston pulled out his phone. "And Evelyn." Richard turned to my mother. "Be nice to Callista tonight. We need her to be compliant on Friday. If Silas asks her to be there, we need her standing quietly in the corner, nodding her head." "I will handle her," Evelyn said, smoothing her dress. "I will tell her we are proud of her logo. That usually shuts her up for a month." I closed the laptop. I pulled the earbuds out and coiled them neatly. I checked my reflection on the dark screen. I didn't look like a beaten dog. I looked like a hunter who had just watched the prey walk willingly into the cage. I stood up, picked up my laptop, and walked to the library door. I paused for a second to compose my face. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I widened my eyes to look eager and naive. I put on the mask of Callista, the disappointed daughter. I opened the doors and walked into the drawing room. "I finished the first draft of the logo," I said, my voice soft and hesitant. "I hope you like it." My parents and brother spun around. The panic vanished from their faces, replaced instantly by the plastic smiles of a happy family. "Callista," my mother beamed, "we were just talking about you. Come show us. We are so excited to see what you have created." I walked toward them, clutching my laptop. "I am sure it is wonderful," Richard said, patting my shoulder. His hand felt heavy, but I didn't flinch. "You have always been such a helpful girl." "I try to be," I said, and I meant it. I was going to be very helpful. I was going to help them lose absolutely everything. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in the banality of evil. I did not have to hack into any more secure servers or guess passwords. My family, in their arrogance and desperation, conducted their business with the digital hygiene of a teenager. They used the unencrypted family Wi-Fi for everything. I sat in my studio apartment, eating takeout sushi, watching the progress of their crime unfold on my second monitor like a slow-motion train wreck. I read the email chain between Preston and the fabricator. A man named Wu, based in a basement workshop on Canal Street in New York City. The subject line was simply, "Rush job. Wu, I can do a Type A replica. Lab-grown corundum. Heavy gold base with platinum plating. It will pass a visual inspection from 6 inches. The cost is $12,000. Time is 3 days. Preston, we don't have 3 days. We have 36 hours, and 12 grand is too high. What can you do for 2? I watched the cursor blink on my screen as I read Wu's reply. I could almost hear the fabricator sighing through the text. "Wu, for 2,500. You get Type B, high-grade cubic zirconia for the diamonds, red leaded glass for the rubies. The setting will be sterling silver dipped in rhodium. It will shine, but it won't hold up to a loupe. And the weight will be off. Silver is half the density of platinum. Preston fine. Type B, just make it sparkle. The old man is blind anyway. Ship it overnight courier." I leaned back in my chair. They were cheap. They were so incredibly cheap that they were willing to risk a $30 million payout to save $10,000 on the forgery. It was not just stinginess. It was a fundamental lack of respect for the object they were faking. To them, the celestial set was just a shiny thing that cost money. They did not understand that gemology is physics. They did not understand that density, refractive index, and fluorescence are not opinions. They are laws. I spent the rest of the day preparing my own kit. If they were bringing a stage prop to a legal proceeding, I needed to bring the laboratory. I opened my field case. It was a pelican case lined with custom-cut foam. I placed my tools inside with the reverence of a sniper assembling a rifle. First, the loupe. A Belomo triplet, 10 times magnification lens. It was a standard issue, but effective. Second, the dichroscope, a small handheld tube that splits light into two beams. Real rubies are pleochroic. They show two different shades of red when looked at from different angles. Glass is singly refractive. It shows the same color no matter how you turn it. One look through this tube, and the rubies would reveal themselves as common glass. Third, and my favorite, the UV torch. I packed a dual wavelength ultraviolet light. This was the trap. The diamonds in the celestial set were old mine cuts, many diamonds from that era, especially the ones my great-grandfather collected, had a strong blue fluorescence. When you hit them with long-wave UV light, they glowed like ghosts. Cubic zirconia, on the other hand, usually stayed dark, or worse, glowed a sickly mustard yellow if it was cheap. Finally, I packed a small digital scale. It fit in the palm of my hand. Preston had ignored Wu's warning about the weight. He thought a few ounces wouldn't matter. He was wrong. The specific gravity of platinum is 21.45. The specific gravity of silver is 10.49. Even to an untrained hand, the difference is noticeable. To a scale, it is screaming. I closed the case and locked it. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had memorized from the envelope Silas gave me. Holloway and Partners, a crisp voice answered. Mr. Holloway, please, I said. This is Callista Thorne. Silas told me to call. There was a brief pause, and then a click. Miss Thorne? Holloway's voice was deep, calm, and reassuring. I have been expecting you. Is everything in place for tomorrow? They ordered a Type B forgery from Chinatown, I said. It arrives tonight. They are planning to present it at the audit tomorrow at noon. Excellent, Holloway said. I have the papers drawn up. The moment they present that necklace as the original, they are committing fraud against the trust. It moves from a civil dispute to a criminal act. Are you prepared to verify it on the record? I am bringing my kit, I said. Good. I will have a stenographer present. And Callista. Yes. Your grandfather wanted me to tell you one thing. He said, don't let them interrupt you. When you start the analysis, finish it. I will, I said. I won't stop until it is done. Thursday night arrived with a biting wind that rattled the windows of my apartment. But I was not staying there. I had been summoned to Thorne Manor. My mother had texted me earlier, come over. We need to brief you on tomorrow, and wear something decent. No corduroy. I drove up the winding driveway at 8 in the evening. The house was lit up like a cruise ship. I could see shadows moving in the drawing room. They were celebrating. I parked my car and walked inside. The heat of the house hit me, carrying the smell of roasting lamb and expensive cognac. My parents were not just planning a fraud. They were having a party for it. I found them in the library. Richard was pouring champagne. Evelyn was holding a black velvet box. Preston was sitting on the desk, swinging his legs like a schoolboy. Callista, Richard boomed. He was red-faced and jovial. Come in, grab a glass. We are toasting to the future. The future, I echoed, declining the glass. Is that it? I nodded toward the box in my mother's hands. This, Evelyn looked at the box and smiled a conspiratorial, nasty little smile. This is our insurance policy. It just arrived. Preston, you are a genius. The courier was here by 7. Open it, Preston urged. Show her. Let's see if the expert can tell. Evelyn unlatched the box and flipped the lid open. Under the warm glow of the library lamps, the necklace exploded with light. It was a massive, intricate web of white and red. The diamonds were huge, glittering with a fierce rainbow fire. The rubies were deep, blood-red pools. It looked expensive. It looked royal. It looked exactly like what a person who knows nothing about jewelry thinks a treasure should look like. Well, Richard asked, swirling his champagne, what do you think worth $8 million? I stepped closer. I didn't need my loupe. I didn't need my UV light. Not yet. From 3 feet away, I could see the fire in the stones was too high. Diamonds have a specific dispersion. Cubic zirconia has a much higher dispersion rate, meaning it throws out too much rainbow light. It looks disco ball flashy, not elegant, and the metal, it was too white. Platinum has a grayish, steely undertone. This was bright, chrome-like white. It was rhodium plating over silver, just as Wu had promised. It is very shiny, I said carefully. Exactly. Preston hopped off the desk. It pops. That is what matters. Grandpa is going to see this sparkle from across the room and sign those papers so fast his hand will cramp. Here, Evelyn thrust the box at me. Hold it. Get a feel for it. You need to look natural tomorrow when you look at it. I reached out and took the box. The moment the weight settled in my hands, I almost laughed. It was light. It felt unsubstantial. The real celestial set was a heavy, burdensome thing, a yoke of platinum and dense stone. This felt like a toy. It was at least 15 grams too light, maybe 20. Be careful with it, my mother warned. We have to return it on Monday to get the deposit back. I ran my thumb over the center stone. The fake eye of midnight. It was smooth, too smooth. Real diamonds have sharp, crisp facet junctions. Molded or mass-cut CZ has rounded edges. So, I said, looking up at them, this is the plan. We walk into Holloway's office. You present this. Grandpa looks at it. We sign. Simple, Richard said. But there is one thing. Callista. He stepped closer to me. The joviality vanished from his face, replaced by the bullying glare I knew so well. Silas asked for you to be there, Richard said, his voice low. He thinks you are some kind of sentimental redundancy. He wants you to verify it. That is just old man talk. When Holloway asks you what you think, you have one line. You say, "It looks beautiful, Grandpa." That is it. Do you understand? You don't talk about weight, Evelyn added, stepping to my other side. You don't talk about settings. You don't squint at it. You just nod, smile, and say it is beautiful. If you try to show off, if you try to act smart and point out a scratch or something, you will blow the whole thing. And if you blow this, Preston leaned in, his breath smelling of whiskey, we lose the 30 million. And if we lose the 30 million, Callista, you can say goodbye to everything. We will cut you off so hard you won't exist. No more family dinners. No more safety net. I looked at them. They were threatening to cut me off from a safety net that didn't exist. They were threatening to exile me from a family I had already left. I looked down at the fake necklace in my hands. It was a perfect metaphor for them. Flashy on the outside, cheap on the inside, and completely hollow. I understand, I said. My voice was calm. I will do my duty as a thorn. Good girl. Richard patted my cheek. It was a patronizing, stinging tap. I knew we could count on you. You are a follower, Callista. And tomorrow, we need you to follow. Give it back. Evelyn snatched the box from my hands. She snapped it shut, cutting off the rainbow glare. I am going to put this in the safe. Go home. Callista, get some sleep. Meet us at Holloway's office at 11:45. Don't be late. I won't be, I said. I turned and walked out of the library. I didn't say goodbye. As I walked to my car, the cold wind felt bracing. I replayed the sensation of the necklace in my hand. 15 grams. That was the weight of their sin. I drove back to my apartment, but I didn't sleep. I spent the night calibrating my scale. I checked the batteries in my UV light 3 times. I reviewed the GIA report for the original Eye of Midnight until I could recite the inclusion map from memory. They thought I was a follower. They were right. I was following the evidence. I was following the truth. And tomorrow, I was going to lead them right off a cliff. At 6 a.m, I stood in front of my mirror. I put on my best suit, a navy blue wool ensemble that I had tailored myself. I pulled my hair back into a tight chignon. I applied a layer of red lipstick, a shade darker than I usually wore. It was called Victory. I picked up my pelican case. It was heavy, reassuring. I looked at myself in the mirror. The sad, invisible girl was gone. Staring back at me was Callista Thorne, the auditor. It looks beautiful. Grandpa? I practiced the line they gave me. Then I smiled. But unfortunately, I whispered to the reflection, it is fake. I walked out the door. The sun was rising over the city, bleaching the gray sky white. It was a perfect day for an execution. The conference room at the law firm of Holloway and Partners was not designed for comfort. It was designed to remind you that you were small and the law was large, located on the 42nd floor. The room was a cavern of polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the blizzard raging outside. The snow swirled against the windows in violent, white sheets, turning the city of Providence into a blur. Inside, the silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the climate control system and the soft whir of a camera lens zooming in. I sat in the far corner, near the audiovisual cart, my black Pelican case resting on the floor beside my feet. I had arrived 15 minutes early, as instructed. Mr. Holloway sat at the head of the massive table. He was a man carved from granite, with silver hair and eyes that revealed nothing. To his right sat Grandpa Silas in his wheelchair. The transformation was terrifyingly perfect. Silas was slumped to one side, a tartan blanket draped over his legs, his mouth slightly open. His hands, usually so strong, twitched rhythmically in his lap. He looked like a man who was already half ghost. 2 paralegals stood by the wall, acting as witnesses. A videographer was positioned near the window, the red tally light of his camera glowing like an unblinking eye. At 11:45 exactly, the double doors swung open. My family entered. They walked in with the energy of people who had already spent the money in their heads. My father, Richard, wore his best bespoke suit, the one he saved for board meetings. My mother, Evelyn, was draped in a fur coat that probably cost more than my entire college education, shaking snowflakes from her shoulders with an air of annoyed importance. Preston followed them, carrying the black velvet box with both hands like it was the Holy Grail. They did not look at me. To them, I was just furniture. I was part of the room's decor, less interesting than the wainscoting. "Sorry we are late," Richard boomed, his voice too loud for the quiet room. He extended a hand to Holloway. "The roads are a nightmare, but we made it. We brought everything. Please, sit down," Holloway said. He did not stand up. He gestured to the 3 empty leather chairs opposite Silas. My parents sat. They were vibrating with adrenaline. I could see a fine sheen of sweat on Richard's upper lip despite the chill of the room. They looked at Silas, and for a second, a flicker of guilt crossed my mother's face. But it was quickly replaced by greed. "Dad," Richard said, leaning forward, "you look comfortable." Silas made a low, guttural sound and shifted in his chair. He did not make eye contact. He stared at the center of the table, his head bobbing slightly. "He is having a quiet day," Holloway said smoothly. "He understands why we are here, but his verbal communication is limited. However, he has instructed me to proceed with the asset transfer protocols immediately, provided all conditions are met." "Of course," Evelyn said, her eyes darting to the camera. "We just want what is best for him, to simplify his estate. To avoid the taxes," Preston added helpfully, earning a sharp kick under the table from his father. "Let us proceed to the inventory," Holloway said. He opened a thick leather binder. "Mr. Thorne has authorized the transfer of the liquid assets, totaling $32 million, to the joint control of Richard and Evelyn Thorne. This is contingent upon the verification of the primary physical asset of the family trust, the celestial set." Holloway looked at Richard. "Do you have the item?" "Right here," Richard said. He nodded to Preston. Preston placed the black box on the center of the polished table. It sat there, a dark void against the gleaming wood. "The complete parure," Richard announced, his voice trembling slightly with the magnitude of the lie. "Necklace, earrings, and brooch. We took it out of the safe this morning. It has been in the family vault for 20 years. "Open it, please," Holloway said. Preston reached out and flipped the lid. The room seemed to brighten. The Type B forgery from Chinatown did exactly what Preston had paid for. It screamed for attention. The synthetic diamonds caught the overhead halogen lights and fractured them into a riot of rainbows. The red glass rubies glowed with a deep, unnatural crimson. My God, Evelyn exhaled, acting her heart out. It is just as breathtaking as I remembered. Richard leaned back, looking satisfied. There it is. $8 million of history. Safe and sound. He looked at Holloway, waiting for the lawyer to be impressed, waiting for the pen to come out, waiting for the check. We can sign the papers now, right? Richard asked, reaching into his jacket pocket for his own fountain pen. I know Dad is tired. We should get him back to the sanctuary. Holloway looked at the necklace. He did not smile. He did not gasp. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at his binder. It is certainly impressive, Holloway said. However, I am a legal representative. Mr. Thorne, I am not a gemologist. I cannot verify that this is the celestial set simply by looking at it. I could be looking at glass and tin for all I know. Richard's laugh was a nervous bark. Glass, mister. Holloway, please. This is the Thorne legacy. Do you think we would insult my father by bringing costume jewelry to a legal signing? Procedural due diligence, Holloway said, his voice flat. The trust document is specific. Before the necklace can be used as a collateral base for the tax transfer, its physical condition must be verified by a qualified beneficiary. Holloway turned his head. For the first time, everyone in the room looked at the corner where I was sitting. Ms. Callista Thorne, Holloway said, please step forward. My father's face went gray. He hadn't expected this. He thought I was there to be a silent prop, a nodding head in the background. He didn't know I was part of the procedure. Wait a minute, Richard said, his voice rising. Is that necessary? Callista is here to observe. She is not. She doesn't need to get involved. She trusts us. He turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading, layered with a hidden threat. Right, Callista. You know it is real. You don't need to touch it. Actually, Holloway interrupted, cutting off my father's attempt to intimidate me. She does. Ms. Thorne is the direct beneficiary of this specific asset under her grandmother's will. Furthermore, she is a certified conservator with the Obsidian Institute. She is the only person in this room qualified to confirm that this object is. In fact, the object listed in the trust. This is ridiculous, Evelyn snapped, her composure cracking. She works with pottery shards. For heaven's sake, she is not an appraiser. She is a thorn. Silas spoke. The voice was weak, scratchy, and quiet, but it stopped the room cold. We all looked at the wheelchair. Silas had lifted his head slightly. His eyes were still cloudy, wandering, but his finger was pointing tremulously at the box. Let the girl see, Silas rasped. She loves sparkly things. Let her say goodbye to it. It was the perfect trap. He had framed it as a sentimental request from a dying old man. If they refused him now, right in front of the camera and the lawyer, they would look cruel. They would look suspicious. Richard ground his teeth. I could see the muscles in his jaw working. He looked at the necklace, which he knew was fake. He looked at me, who he thought was stupid. He made the calculation. He decided that I was still the scared little girl who designed logos for free and apologized for taking up space. He decided I wouldn't know the difference, or if I did, I wouldn't dare say it. Fine, Richard exhaled, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. Dad wants you to see it. Callista, come take a look, but be quick. We are on a schedule. I stood up. I did not walk over to the table immediately. I bent down and picked up my pelican case. I set it on the table with a heavy thud that echoed in the silence. The sound made Preston jump. I unlatched the case. Click, click. The sound was mechanical and precise. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in the black foam, were my tools: the dichroscope, the specific gravity scale, the refractometer, and the UV torch. My father stared at the case. What is all that? Standard verification kit, I said softly. I reached into the side pocket of the case and pulled out a pair of white cotton archival gloves. I pulled them on, smoothing the fabric over each finger. The sound of the cotton sliding over my skin was the only noise in the room. My movements were slow, deliberate. I was no longer their daughter. I was a technician entering a clean room. I saw the panic flare in my mother's eyes. She realized, too late, that the rabbit had brought claws. I stepped up to the table. The fake necklace lay there, blazing under the lights. Preston leaned in close to me. He pretended to be admiring the necklace, but his face was inches from my ear. I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath masked by mints. "Don't do this," he whispered, his voice a hiss of pure venom. "Don't you dare make a scene. Callista, just look at it, nod, and sit down." I didn't acknowledge him. I reached for the necklace. "I will give you $500, Preston whispered urgently. "Cash. Today. Just say it is real." I froze. My hand hovered over the fake diamonds. $500. That was the price they put on my integrity. That was the price they put on my grandmother's legacy. That was the price they put on me. I turned my head slowly and looked Preston directly in the eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't look down. I didn't flinch. I let him see the cold, hard contempt that had been building in me for 26 years. $500, I asked aloud. My voice was not a whisper. It was clear, calm, and carried perfectly to the microphone on the video camera. The room went silent. Holloway looked up. Richard froze. "You think my silence costs $500? I continued, holding Preston's gaze until he blinked. "Preston, you really need to update your valuation of me. I am a lot more expensive than that." I turned back to the table. "Ms. Thorne," Holloway said, his pen hovering over the paper. "Please proceed with the verification." "Gladly," I said. I reached down and picked up the necklace. It was light, shamefully light. "Step 1, I said, my voice taking on the lecture hall cadence of a professor. "Mass and density analysis." I placed the necklace on my digital scale. The numbers on the small screen flickered and settled. 142 grams. I looked at my father. He was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't understand the physics. "According to the Cartier archives," I said, reciting the data without looking at any notes. "The celestial set was crafted in 95% pure platinum. The recorded weight of the necklace is 188 grams. I pointed to the scale. "This is 46 grams light," I said. "That is a statistical impossibility for platinum. But it is exactly the weight one would expect from a silver alloy base." "Scales can be wrong," Evelyn shouted. Her voice was shrill, cracking the professional atmosphere. "It is an old scale. You brought a broken scale." "It was calibrated this morning," I said calmly. "But you are right. Mother, mass is just one variable. Let us look at the optics." I picked up the UV torch. "No." Richard lunged forward, his hand reaching out to grab the necklace. "That is enough. She is breaking it. She is damaging it." "Mr. Thorne," Holloway's voice was like a whip crack. "Sit down. If you interfere with the verification, the deal is void immediately." Richard froze. He looked at the $30 million vanishing. He sank back into his chair, defeated, breathing heavily. "Proceed," Holloway said to me. I switched on the UV torch. "The diamonds in the celestial set are old mine cuts from the late 19th century, I explained, aiming the beam at the necklace. "Many of them possess a strong blue fluorescence. It is a fingerprint of natural nitrogen distribution in the carbon lattice." I hit the necklace with the light. Nothing happened. The stones remained dark, dead, inert. "Darkness," I said. "No fluorescence. Highly unlikely for a collection of 50 natural stones." However, I switched the wavelength on the torch to long wave. Suddenly, the necklace glowed, but it didn't glow blue. It glowed a sickly, pale yellow-green. "There it is," I said. "That yellow-green cast. That is the signature of zirconium oxide stabilizers used in modern cubic zirconia production. I turned off the light. I picked up my loop. I didn't really need it, but I wanted to twist the knife. I wanted them to sweat for one more minute. I held the loop to my eye and leaned in close to the center stone, the fake eye of midnight. "Preston," I said, without looking up, "you really should have paid the extra $10,000 for the Type A forgery. This one has mold lines on the girdle." You little witch," Preston hissed. I straightened up. I took off the gloves, one finger at a time, and dropped them onto the table next to the shining pile of glass. I looked at Holloway. "Mr. Holloway," I said clearly, "this is not the Celestial set. This is a costume replica made of rhodium-plated silver, cubic zirconia, and leaded glass. It is a prop, and a cheap one at that." "She is lying," Evelyn screamed, standing up. "She is lying because she hates us. She is jealous. Science doesn't have feelings, Mother," I said. "And neither do I." I looked at the camera, ensuring my face was clear in the frame. "This is a counterfeit," I stated for the record, which raises the question, where is the real one? I looked at my father. He looked like a man who had just been shot in the gut. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc, waiting to drop, and then, from the wheelchair, came a sound. It was a chuckle, dry, clear, and utterly devoid of dementia. "Well done, Callista," Silas said. He sat up straight, pulled the blanket off his legs, and tossed it onto the floor. "I believe," Silas said, looking at his son with eyes as cold as the blizzard outside, "that we have caught the rats in the cheese." I did not step back. I stood my ground, the heavy mahogany table acting as the altar for my demonstration. The room was so quiet that I could hear the wind howling against the glass panes on the 42nd floor, a distant, mournful keenness that contrasted sharply with the sterile silence inside. My family sat in a frozen tableau. Their eyes locked on my hands. They were waiting for me to falter, to apologize, to revert to the obedient daughter who existed only to serve their needs. But that daughter was gone. In her place stood the professional. I reached into my Pelican case again and withdrew a sleek, black anodized aluminum cylinder. It was a specialized dual-wavelength UV torch, a tool I used almost daily at the Institute. It felt cool and solid in my grip, a wand of truth in a room full of lies. "Let us discuss the red stones first," I said, my voice calm, measured, and stripped of any familial warmth. I was lecturing now. "You have always called them rubies. It is a common layman's error, but the archives state clearly that the red gems in the Celestial set are actually red spinels, sourced from the ancient mines of Badakhshan. They are the same stones that adorn the imperial state crown of England. The Black Prince's ruby is, in fact, a spinel." I glanced at my mother. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes darting nervously between me and the necklace. She had no idea what I was talking about. To her, red was just red. "Spinel has a very specific optical property," I continued, turning the torch over in my hand. "It owes its vibrant color to traces of chromium. And chromium, when excited by ultraviolet light, does something quite magical. It fluoresces." I clicked the switch on the torch. A beam of focused, violet light cut through the air. "Under long-wave ultraviolet radiation," I explained, aiming the beam away from the necklace for a moment. "A genuine Badakhshan spinel from the 19th century should glow. It should scream a bright, neon red. It should look like burning coal." I lowered the beam. The violet circle of light hit the central red stone of the necklace. The room leaned in. Richard held his breath. Preston gripped the arms of his chair. The stone did not glow. It did not burn. It sat there, dull and lifeless, absorbing the violet light and reflecting back nothing but a muddy, brownish darkness. "That is unfortunate," I said, keeping the light fixed on the dead stone. Total extinction. No fluorescence whatsoever. I moved the light to the side stones. Dark, dark, dark. They looked like drops of dried blood. Not living fire. Strange, I murmured, playing the part of the perplexed scientist. Highly irregular. What? Richard croaked. His face was slick with sweat, his complexion the color of old dough. What does that mean? It means, I said, turning off the torch and setting it down with a click, that these stones lack chromium, which is impossible for natural red spinel. It suggests the material is inert, likely a lead-glass composite or a synthetic corundum grown without the proper trace elements. It is dust, Richard blurted out. He stood up halfway, his hands shaking as he reached for a napkin from the water service tray. The vault is dusty. It has been sitting there for 20 years. The dust is blocking the light. Here, let me wipe it. He lunged toward the table, desperate to erase the evidence, desperate to intervene. Sit down, Richard, I said. I did not shout. I did not raise my voice. I simply gave a command, and to my surprise, and his, he froze. He looked at me, stunned by the authority in my tone. Dust does not stop fluorescence, Father, I said gently, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. But if you are concerned about surface contamination, we can move to a test that no amount of cleaning can fix. I reached for my loop. It was a Bellomo 10-power triplet loop, the industry standard. I unfolded it, the metal housing clicking satisfyingly into place. Let us examine the centerpiece, I said. The Eye of Midnight. I picked up the necklace again. The metal felt warm now, heated by the intensity of the overhead lights. But it still felt wrong. It felt cheap. The Eye of Midnight is a 40-carat, old mine-cut diamond, I stated, holding the loop to my right eye and bringing the necklace up until it was an inch from my face. Diamonds formed in the earth billions of years ago are chaotic. They are violent events trapped in crystal. They have birthmarks. We call them inclusions. I focused on the large, clear stone in the center of the pendant. This specific diamond is famous for a singular flaw, I said, keeping my eye trained on the stone. It has a needle inclusion, a long, thin crystal of diopside trapped deep within the table facet. It looks like a small scar. It is the fingerprint of the stone. It is how my grandmother identified it. It is how the insurers identify it. I moved the necklace slightly, tilting it to catch the light, searching the depths of the stone. I am looking for the needle, I said. My family held their breath. The silence was suffocating. Even the camera operator seemed to stop breathing. Through the lens, the stone was magnificent in the worst possible way. It was a barren wasteland of perfection. There were no needles, no clouds, no feathers, no crystals. It was a continuous, uninterrupted lattice of synthetic clarity. It was sterile. Well, Preston asked, his voice cracking. Do you see it? I lowered the loop. I looked at the stone with my naked eye, then back at my family. It is incredible, I said. A flicker of hope lit up Evelyn's eyes. It is... Yes, I nodded. It is incredibly clean. In fact, it is too clean. It is optically perfect. See? Richard exhaled, a massive rush of air leaving his lungs. It is perfect. I told you, it is the best diamond in the world. No, Father, I cut him off. You do not understand. Nature is not perfect. Nature is messy. A diamond of this size, from that era, without a single inclusion, it is a statistical impossibility. It is 1 in a billion. I tapped the stone with my fingernail. It made a high, plinking sound. This stone has no needle, I said. It has no grain. It has no soul. It is a piece of cubic zirconia, likely mass-produced in a sterile lab in China about 3 days ago. It is sterile, it is industrial, and it is absolutely 100% fake. You are lying, Evelyn hissed. The sound tore through the room like a fabric ripping. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. Her face was contorted into a mask of pure rage. You ungrateful little brat! You are doing this on purpose. You are jealous because we didn't give you the money. You are trying to sabotage us. Stop this right now." She reached out as if to grab the necklace from me. "Mrs. Thorne," Holloway's voice boomed. He slammed his hand on the table. "Sit down. You are in a legal proceeding." "She is ruining it," Evelyn screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is making it up. Look at her. She is enjoying this. She is just a failed artist with a magnifying glass." "What does she know?" "I know that the refractive index of this stone is too high," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "I know that the specific gravity is off by 30%, and I know that you are currently trying to pass off a $2,000 theater prop as an $8 million inheritance." "That is enough," Richard shouted. "The deal is off. We are leaving Dad. We are going home." He reached for the wheelchair handles. "Sit down, Richard," Holloway said. His voice was lower now. "Dangerous. Nobody is leaving. This is a recorded audit. If you attempt to remove the asset or the principal before the conclusion of the verification, I will have security detain you for attempted theft." Richard froze. He looked at the door. He looked at the camera. He looked at me. He realized, finally, that he was not in charge. "Mr. Holloway," I said, turning my back on my parents. "I have not finished the official report. May I continue?" Holloway adjusted his glasses. He looked at me with a newfound respect. He saw the professional. He saw the competence. "Please," Holloway said, "finish it." I turned back to the necklace. I was not done. I wanted to bury them under a mountain of irrefutable, scientific fact. I wanted to make sure that no amount of lying, no amount of gaslighting, could ever dig them out of this hole. "Thank you," I said. I picked up the necklace again. "We have established that the stones are synthetic. Now, let us talk about metal." I reached into my case and pulled out a small bottle of acid. "This," I said, holding up the vial, "is nitric acid." Preston's eyes went wide. "You are going to burn it." "Platinum is a noble metal," I said. "It is impervious to nitric acid. You could dip the real celestial necklace in a vat of this stuff, and it would come out shining. Silver. However, silver reacts." I saw Preston flinch. He knew. He knew exactly what he had bought. "I am going to perform a touchstone test on the clasp," I announced. "It is a microscopic test. It will not damage the piece if the piece is real." I took a small, unglazed ceramic tile from my kit. I rubbed the clasp of the necklace gently against the tile, leaving a faint, silvery streak. "A tiny streak of metal," I narrated. "Now, 1 drop of acid." I uncapped the bottle. The fumes drifted up, sharp and chemical. I let a single drop fall onto the streak on the tile. If it was platinum, the streak would remain bright and shiny. The drop hit the metal trace. Instantly, the streak bubbled. It turned a cloudy, milky gray, then vanished, dissolving into a green sludge. "Green," I said. "The color of dissolved copper and silver, the signature of a base metal alloy." I looked up. "It is not platinum," I said. "It is not even white gold. It is silver, cheap, rhodium-plated silver." I wiped the tile clean with a cloth and placed it back in the case. "So," I said, addressing Holloway directly, "to summarize my findings, the red stones are glass, not spinal. The diamonds are cubic zirconia, not carbon. The metal is silver, not platinum. The total material value of this item is approximately," I paused, doing a quick mental calculation, $200 for the silver, maybe $50 for the glass. Let's be generous and say $300. I looked at my parents. They were huddled together, shrinking into their expensive clothes. They looked small. They looked pathetic. $300, I repeated. For a legacy that was supposed to be worth millions. It must be a mistake, Richard whispered. He was broken. Maybe the vault. Maybe someone swapped it. Someone did swap it, I said. 2 years ago, when you sell the real one?" "That is a lie," Evelyn shrieked. But there was no power in it. It was the desperate cry of a drowning woman. "Is it?" I asked. I reached into my laptop bag, which was resting against the leg of the table. I pulled out a file folder. "I have the invoice," I said. "From the private sale in Singapore, dated October 14th, 2 years ago, signed by Richard and Evelyn Thorne." I slid the folder across the mahogany table toward Holloway. "And," I added, "I have the email correspondence from 3 days ago, between Preston and a fabricator named Wu in New York City, commissioning a Type B rush job replica for $2,500. I slid a second stack of papers across the table. "It is all there," I said. "The theft, the cover-up, and the fraud." My parents stared at the papers. They didn't touch them. They looked at them as if they were radioactive. "You hacked us," Preston whispered. "You little—" "I audited you," I corrected him. "You asked for a logo, Preston. You asked for branding. Well, here is your brand fraud." I took off my gloves and placed them neatly in the case. I closed the lid and latched it. The sound was like a gavel coming down. "My assessment is complete, Mr. Holloway," I said. "The item is a counterfeit. The asset is missing. The trust has been looted." Holloway nodded slowly. He placed his hand on the files I had given him. "Thank you, Ms. Thorne," he said. "That was thorough." He turned to my parents. His face was hard, professional, and completely merciless. "Richard, Evelyn, Preston," Holloway said, "we have a problem." But before he could continue, a sound came from the head of the table. We all turned. Silas Thorne was sitting up. He had pushed the wheelchair back from the table. He was no longer slumped. He was no longer twitching. He was crossing his legs, and he was taking a sip of water from the crystal glass in front of him. He set the glass down. "We do not have a problem, Mr. Holloway," Silas said. His voice was strong, resonant, the voice of the man who had built an empire. He looked at his son. "You have a problem, Richard," Silas said. "I believe the technical term is checkmate." I did not give them time to recover from Grandpa Silas's miraculous resurrection. The shock on their faces was a canvas I intended to paint with every shade of their humiliation. Richard was staring at his father as if he were seeing a ghost. Evelyn was gripping her pearls so tightly I thought the string might snap. Preston was looking at the door, calculating the distance to freedom. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through their paralysis, "I didn't need the acid, I didn't need the UV light, and I certainly didn't need the loop to know this was fake." I walked over to the audiovisual cart in the corner. I plugged an HDMI cable into my laptop. "I knew it was fake," I continued, "because I watched you order it." I hit the enter key. The 80-inch monitor on the wall flickered to life. Projected in high definition was a screen capture of Preston's email inbox. The subject line, "Rush Job," was highlighted in yellow. From Wu Fabrications, Canal Street, to Preston Thorne, invoice number 9942. Item, theatrical prop necklace. Style Victorian replica. Material silver/rhodium/CZ. Price, $2,500. $2,500. I read the number aloud. "You didn't even spring for the express shipping insurance. That is how little you value this legacy." That is fake," Preston shouted. He stood up, his face a mottled red. "She doctored it. She is a graphic designer. She photoshopped it." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," Holloway warned. But Preston ignored him. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. Now, it showed a bank transfer receipt. It was from the family's joint operating account, the one they were currently overdrawn on. Recipient Wu Fabrications. Date January 21st, 2026. Memo stage prop. "Did I Photoshop the bank records too? Preston," I asked. "Did I hack into Chase Manhattan and plant a transaction specifically labeled stage prop just to frame you?" Preston looked like he was about to vomit. He sank back into his chair. "But that is just a fraud," I said. pacing in front of the screen. That is just a clumsy attempt to cover up the real crime. The real crime happened 2 years ago. I clicked the remote again. The screen filled with a document that made my mother let out a small, strangled whimper. It was a bill of sale. The letterhead was from the Orchid Room Auction House, Singapore. Item, the Celestial Set Broken Lot. Seller Richard and Evelyn Thorne. Buyer anonymous private collection. Net proceeds, $8,400,000. $8 million, I said. You sold Grandma's necklace. You sold my inheritance. And where did the money go? I clicked the remote one last time. A spreadsheet appeared. It was a forensic accounting of the last 24 months. It showed a river of money flowing out of the account and evaporating. McLaren lease payments, $6,000 a month. Crypto exchange, loss, $2.4 million. Online gambling platform account, Pthorn Win, $1.8 million. Vacation rentals, Aspen, St. Bart's, Maldives, $400,000. You didn't invest it, I said, turning to look at my parents. You didn't save it. You didn't use it to pay off the mortgage on the house you were about to lose. You ate it. You snorted it. You drove it. You gambled it away. I pointed at the screen. Look at it. Look at the math. You burned $8 million in 2 years. That is $11,000 a day. You spent more on lunch than I earn in a month. Stop it, Evelyn screamed. She covered her ears with her hands. Turn it off. I don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. I walked toward her. You have been living it, Mother. You wore that fur coat while I was sewing patches on my elbows. You drank vintage wine while I was eating ramen. You looked me in the eye and told me I was bad with money while you were lighting millions on fire. We did it for the family, Richard stammered. He looked small, shriveled. We had to maintain appearances, for the business, for Preston's investors. There are no investors, I shouted. The anger I had bottled up for years finally exploded. Preston doesn't have a business. He has a gambling addiction and a delusion, and you enabled him. You sold my birthright to fund his fantasy. Preston suddenly lunged. He scrambled over the table, his eyes wild, reaching for my laptop. Turn it off, he shrieked. I will kill you. Before he could reach me, a massive hand grabbed him by the back of his suit jacket. It was Holloway's lead security guard, a man named Bruno, who had been standing silently by the door. Bruno yanked Preston back and slammed him into his chair with a force that rattled the windows. Stay seated, Bruno growled. Preston slumped in the chair, gasping for air, looking terrified. I didn't flinch. I stood there, breathing hard, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I turned to my mother. She was weeping now, ugly, black mascara tears running down her face. Callista, she sobbed. Please, we are your family. We made mistakes, but we love you. Don't do this. Don't ruin us. Love, I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. You don't love me. You tolerate me. You use me. You mock me. I walked back to the table and picked up the fake necklace. It dangled from my hand, limp and cheap. You remember what you said to me at dinner? I asked softly. When you threw my check in the caviar, you said, don't embarrass yourself with that prop. You said, that is what happens when you rely on fake things. I held the necklace up to her face. You were right, Mother, I said. This is a prop. This is fake. It is shiny on the outside and hollow on the inside. I closed my hand around the necklace. I squeezed. The metal was soft sterling silver, not platinum. It bent easily under my grip. I felt the settings warp. I felt the glue give way. I squeezed harder, channeling every ounce of pain, every rejection, every lonely Christmas into my hand. Snap. The necklace broke. The cheap links gave way. I opened my hand. The pieces of the celestial set fell onto the mahogany table. The fake diamonds bounced and rolled like marbles. The red glass shards scattered. The twisted metal frame lay there like a dead snake. It is garbage, I said. Just like your love for me. My mother stared at the broken pile of glass and wire. She looked as if I had just snapped her neck. Callista, she whispered. Don't, I said. Don't say my name. You lost the right to that name when you sold my future to buy a sports car. I turned to Holloway. I am done, I said. The asset is verified as counterfeit. The fraud is proven. Thank you, Ms. Thorne, Holloway said. He stood up. He looked at my parents, who were now just 3 terrified people in a room that was getting smaller by the second. Richard, Evelyn, Preston, Holloway said. Under the terms of the trust, attempting to pass a forgery during an audit is grounds for immediate disinheritance. Furthermore, the sale of the original assets constitutes grand larceny, embezzlement, and fraud. He opened a folder. I have already contacted the district attorney, Holloway said. Officers are waiting in the lobby. However, he paused. He looked at Silas. Silas nodded. However, Holloway continued, Mr. Silas Thorne has authorized me to offer you a deal, a one-time offer to avoid prison. My father looked up. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flickered in his eyes. A deal, anything. We will do anything. You will sign over the deed to Thorne Manor immediately, Holloway said. You will liquidate all remaining personal assets, cars, jewelry, furs to repay the trust, and you will leave Rhode Island. You will not contact Callista or Silas ever again. Leave? Evelyn gasped. But where will we go? We have no money. That, Silas said from his wheelchair, his voice cold and final, is not my problem. You have your health. You have your business minds. I suggest you get jobs. Jobs, Preston whispered, horrified. Yes, Silas said. I hear the service industry is hiring. You might learn the value of $1. If you do not agree, Holloway said, the police come up, and you will be facing 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Richard looked at his wife. He looked at his son. He looked at the broken necklace on the table. He slumped. Where do I sign? He whispered. I watched them sign the papers. I watched them sign away the house, the cars, the last shreds of their dignity. I watched them sign their own exile. When they were done, Holloway took the papers. Get out, Silas said. They stood up. They didn't look at me. They walked to the door. A procession of the damned. As Preston passed me, he stopped. He looked at me with pure hate. You think you won, he spat. But you are alone. Callista, you have no one. I looked at him. I looked at the grandfather who had fought for me. I looked at the career I had built. I looked at the $20,000 in my bank account that I had earned with my loyalty. I am not alone. Preston, I said, I have the truth, and unlike you, I can afford it. Bruno opened the door. Goodbye, I said. They walked out into the hallway, and the heavy doors clicked shut behind them, sealing them out of my life forever. The room was quiet again. I looked at the pile of fake jewels on the table. I swept them into a trash can with the back of my hand. Then, I looked at Silas. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. That, he said, was beautiful. I walked over to him and took his hand. It was warm. It is over, I said. No, Silas said, squeezing my hand. It is just beginning. The silence in the conference room was absolute. A heavy blanket that smothered the last gasps of my family's arrogance. The only sound was the howling wind outside, battering against the glass of the skyscraper like a caged beast. Inside, the beast was already dead. Grandpa Silas placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair, with a groan of effort that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with age. He pushed himself up. He stood tall, his spine straightening, shedding the hunch of the invalid he had played for 5 long years. He looked at me, his blue eyes clear and sparkling with pride. Thank you, Callista, he said, his voice firm. That was an excellent appraisal. You have the Thorne eye for detail. After all, perhaps the only one of us who still does. He turned slowly to face his son, his daughter-in-law, and his grandson. They were huddled together near the door, stripped of their bravado, looking like wet dogs caught in a storm. "Richard," Silas said. "Evelyn, Preston." He did not shout. He did not scream. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying authority of a judge passing a final sentence. "You spent years waiting for me to die," Silas continued. "You spent years treating me like a piece of broken furniture, waiting to inherit the house I built, the money I earned. You thought I was deaf. You thought I was blind. But I saw everything. I heard every insult. I watched every theft." "Mr." Holloway stepped forward, opening a leather-bound folder. He cleared his throat. "As of 9 o'clock this morning," Holloway announced, his voice dry and professional. "Mr. Silas Thorne has executed a codicil to his last will and testament. Due to the proven acts of gross mismanagement, fraud, embezzlement, and the attempted sale of counterfeit assets during a legal audit, the three of you are hereby disinherited." "Disinherited," Evelyn whispered. The words seemed to choke her. "But we are family." "You are criminals," Holloway corrected. "Clause 42 of the trust is explicit. Any beneficiary who attempts to defraud the trust forfeits all rights to it immediately. You get nothing. No monthly stipend, no access to the properties, no trust fund for Preston. It is all gone." "You can't do this," Preston shouted, his voice cracking into a sob. "I have debts. I have people looking for me. If I don't pay them, they will break my legs." "Then I suggest you learn to run," Silas said coldly. "Furthermore," Holloway continued, ignoring Preston's outburst, "we have the matter of the original celestial set. The documents Ms. Callista provided prove that you sold property that did not belong to you. That is grand larceny. The district attorney is currently reviewing the file." Richard went white. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "Prison dad, you wouldn't send your own son to prison." Silas looked at Richard. I saw a flicker of pain in the old man's eyes, the grief of a father realizing his son was lost, but he did not waver. "I am giving you a choice, Richard," Silas said. "A mercy you do not deserve. Holloway has prepared a voluntary surrender agreement. If you sign it, you agree to vacate Thorne Manor within 24 hours. You leave with your clothes and your personal effects, nothing of value, no art, no silver, no cars purchased with trust money. You leave Rhode Island, and you never contact me or Callista again." "And if we sign?" Evelyn asked, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "If you sign," Silas said, "I will ask Holloway to delay filing the criminal charges. I will give you a head start. You can go somewhere else and start over." "Without my money?" "And if we don't," Richard asked, "then the officers waiting in the lobby come up," Holloway said, "and you leave here in handcuffs." The room erupted into chaos. It was not a dignified surrender. It was a collapse. Preston turned on his father, shoving him hard in the chest. "This is your fault. I told you the fake looked cheap. I told you we should have spent the extra money. You were too stingy to buy the good fake. And now I am going to be homeless." "My fault," Richard roared back, shoving Preston away. "You are the one who gambled away $2 million. You are the leech who bled us dry. If it weren't for your investments, we wouldn't be in this mess." "Stop it," Evelyn screamed at both of them, clutching her fur coat as if it were a life raft. "Stop fighting. We have to sign. I can't go to jail. I can't wear orange. It washes me out." It was pathetic. It was a scene of absolute moral bankruptcy. They weren't mourning the loss of their family. They were mourning the loss of their status. They were fighting over who to blame for the fact that the golden tap had been turned off. I watched them, expecting to feel sadness. I expected to feel a pang of loss for the parents I used to look up to, the brother I used to play with. But I felt nothing. No, that is not true. I felt something. I felt light. I felt the way I feel when I finish a long, difficult restoration project. I felt the satisfaction of scraping away the grime and the varnish to reveal the clean, honest truth underneath. The heavy coat of obligation, of fear, of trying to please people who could not be pleased, it simply slid off my shoulders and dissolved. Sign the papers, Silas commanded. They signed. They scrambled over each other to get to the pen, terrified that the offer might be withdrawn, hands shaking, weeping, cursing under their breath. They signed away the manor, the legacy, and their lies. "Now get out," Silas said. "Bruno, the security guard, opened the door." My former family, walked out. They did not look back. They were too busy arguing about who was going to drive the one car they were allowed to keep. The heavy door clicked shut, silencing their bickering instantly. The silence that followed was profound. I let out a long breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. "Are you okay?" Holloway asked, looking at me with concern. I looked at the closed door, then at my grandfather. "I am fine," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. "I am actually really fine." Silas walked over to me. Yes, walked, and put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong. "Clarity is expensive, Callista," he said softly. "It costs you your illusions, but it is worth every penny." 6 months later, the ocean breeze blew through the open windows of the cottage, carrying the scent of salt and wild roses. It was a far cry from the imposing, suffocating stone walls of Thorn Manor. This house was small, made of weathered cedar shingles, sitting on a dune overlooking the Atlantic. It was cozy. It was real. I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea, watching Grandpa Silas throw a tennis ball for a golden retriever he had adopted from the shelter. He named the dog Judge. Thorn Manor was gone. We sold it 3 months ago. The proceeds, after paying off the debts my parents had accrued, were significant, but Silas didn't want the money. He said it was tainted. We donated the entire sum to the Rhode Island School of Design to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged artists. We called it the Callista Thorne Grant for the Arts. My parents were gone, too. I heard through the grapevine that they had moved to Florida. Richard was selling timeshares. Preston was working as a promoter for a nightclub that had 2 stars on Yelp. Evelyn was reportedly trying to start a lifestyle blog about recovering from tragedy. I didn't read it. I didn't care. I looked down at the tablet in my lap. The logo on the screen was sleek, modern, and sharp. Thorn Authentication, Forensic Analysis, Art Verification. It was my company. I had used the $20,000, the money from that fake check, to buy my own equipment. I bought a better spectrometer. I rented a small office space in downtown Providence. I hired a paralegal. Business was booming. It turned out that in a world full of fakes, people were desperate for truth. Museums hired me to check their acquisitions. Private collectors hired me to audit their vaults before divorcing their spouses. I have a reputation now. They called me the Hawk. They said if you wanted to know if a diamond was real or if a painting was a forgery, you called Callista Thorne. I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I wasn't the prop. I was the authority. My phone buzzed. It was an email from a client in New York. They wanted me to fly out and inspect a Faberge egg that was coming up for auction. They were offering a fee that would have taken me 2 years to earn at the museum. I smiled and typed a reply, "I'm available." Silas walked up the porch steps, breathing heavily, but looking healthier than he had in a decade. His cheeks were pink from the sun. "Working?" he asked, dropping into the wicker chair beside me. "Always," I said. "Just landed the Faberge job." "Good," Silas nodded. "You have a business mind. Callista, a real one, not like those other fools." He looked out at the ocean, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You know," he said, "your mother called me last week." I stiffened slightly. "She did." "She wanted money," Silas chuckled. "She said it was unfair that I was living here in comfort while she was clipping coupons. She said she was my daughter-in-law and she deserved support." "What did you tell her?" I asked. Silas grinned, the same mischievous grin he had given me under the dinner table that night. "I told her I couldn't help her," Silas said. "I told her all my assets were tied up." "Tied up in what?" "I told her I invested everything in a very promising startup." Silas winked at me. A company run by my granddaughter. I told her the dividends were paid in integrity, a currency she unfortunately doesn't accept. I laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt light. I looked at the check stub I had framed and hung on the wall of the cottage. It was the receipt from that day at the bank. Deposit $20,000. My mother had been right about one thing. That check was a test. It was a prop in a play she didn't understand. She thought it was a piece of paper to be mocked. She thought it was a symbol of senility. But she was wrong about the most important part. It wasn't fake. I stood up and walked to the railing, breathing in the salt air. I had my grandfather. I had my work. I had my dignity. Mom said Grandpa's $20,000 check was fake, I whispered to the wind. So I deposited it, and I bought my freedom. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please drop a comment below and tell me where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you would have done in my position. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people.